The silence that had defined Sophia Chen's world for 19 years carried a peculiar advantage. She'd learned to read what others could only hear. Lips formed words with unconscious honesty when people believed their voices provided privacy. Secrets spilled across mouths like water, visible to anyone who knew how to look. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. The Harbor Room occupied Charleston's most exclusive waterfront real estate, where yacht owners dined on blackened grouper and discussed investments that could buy small countries. Sophia moved between tables with the fluid grace of someone who'd learned to navigate space through vision alone, her black uniform pressed to perfection, her dark hair twisted into a sleek bun that kept it away from her face. She needed to see everything. Her name tag read Sophie, though most patrons never looked long enough to register it. To them, she was invisible. A waitress who brought wine and cleared plates, someone who existed to serve without being seen. They had no idea she could read every word their mouths formed from across the room, that their supposedly private conversations played out before her like silent movies, with perfect subtitles. The regulars treated the harbor room like a second office. Business deals concluded over raw oysters, affairs negotiated between the salad and entree courses, lies told so smoothly that even the liar seemed to believe them. Sophia had witnessed them all, filing away secrets she'd never share, never acknowledge. Discretion was currency in fine dining, and she'd made herself wealthy in things left unsaid. Tuesday evenings followed predictable patterns. The mayor's chief of staff at table 6, always ordering the salmon despite claiming to love variety. The real estate developer at table 9, whose phone calls to his wife contradicted the texts he sent to someone named Kara, saved with a knife emoji. The art gallery owner who laundered money through overpriced paintings, sold to buyers who never existed. And Marco DeLuca, who occupied the corner booth every Tuesday at exactly 7:30. He'd been coming for 8 months now, always alone, always ordering the same bourbon, Blanton's, 2 fingers, single ice sphere. His suits cost more than Sophia's monthly rent, custom-tailored to accommodate broad shoulders and a frame that suggested violence lived comfortably beneath expensive fabric. Silver touched his dark hair at the temples, distinguished rather than aging. His hands fascinated her most, scarred knuckles hidden under gold cufflinks, fingers that signed checks with the same ease they'd probably signed death warrants. Marco DeLuca never raised his voice because he didn't need to. Power radiated from him like heat from pavement in July, bending the room's atmosphere around his presence. Other diners lowered their voices when he entered, an instinctive deference to something they sensed but couldn't name. Even the sommelier, who treated senators like college students, approached DeLuca's table with visible caution. Sophia had been assigned to serve him 3 months ago, after the previous server requested reassignment without explanation. She'd accepted the table because refusing wasn't really an option, and because watching Marco DeLuca had become the most interesting part of her workweek. He never looked at her directly, yet she felt his awareness like static electricity whenever she approached his booth. His bourbon appeared when needed without him having to signal. His water glass never emptied. The kitchen knew to start his meal the moment he sat down. Grilled swordfish, no lemon, extra capers. He left exactly 20%, calculated to the penny, and departed at 8:45 with the same silent efficiency he'd arrived. Tonight started no different. Marco settled into his corner booth at 7:30, his usual bourbon materializing before him like magic. Sophia had learned to anticipate his needs through observation rather than requests. He rarely spoke to her beyond "thank you," delivered in a voice so low she'd learned to read his lips even before she'd needed to. The restaurant hummed with Tuesday evening energy, financial advisors celebrating closed deals, couples attempting to resurrect dying marriages over expensive wine, tourists documenting every course for Instagram feeds no one would see. Sophia navigated the controlled chaos with practiced ease, her attention split between her current tables and the peripheral awareness that had kept her employed at Charleston's finest establishments. Two men entered at 8:15, fracturing the evening's predictable rhythm. They didn't wait to be seated, instead scanning the dining room with predatory focus before positioning themselves at the bar. Their suits fit wrong, too tight across shoulders that suggested muscle built for function rather than aesthetics, too loose at the waist where concealed weapons created bulk beneath fabric. The bartender served them without the usual small talk, his instincts clearly registering what Sophia had immediately noticed. These men didn't belong in the harbor room's refined atmosphere. She delivered oysters to table 4 while watching the newcomers in the mirror behind the bar. The shorter one, dark beard, scar bisecting his left eyebrow, ordered scotch he didn't drink. The taller one, blonde with cold blue eyes, kept his right hand inside his jacket in a way that made Sophia's stomach tighten. Neither man looked at Marco DeLuca directly, but everything about their positioning orbited him like moons around a planet. They'd come for him specifically, waiting for something, timing an approach that hadn't happened yet. Sophia cleared appetizer plates from table 7, her hands steady despite the adrenaline beginning to flood her system. Years of navigating a hearing world had taught her to trust her eyes absolutely, and right now her eyes were telling her that violence waited in the space between bourbon and bad intentions. The blond man's lips moved, angled toward his companion. Sophia caught the words across 20 feet of dining room. 9 o'clock, exit through kitchen, make it look natural. Her blood turned to ice water. She glanced at the antique clock above the bar. 8:47 p.m., 13 minutes. The shorter man responded, his mouth forming words with careful precision. Boss wants it clean, no witnesses. Cardone's already positioned outside. Cardone. The name triggered recognition. Antonio Cardone, suspected enforcer for the Russo family. She'd read about him in crime reports during her obsessive consumption of news articles, feeding a criminal justice interest she couldn't afford to pursue formally. Cardone specialized in making problems disappear, permanently and publicly enough to send messages. Marco DeLuca sat in his booth, apparently absorbed in documents spread before him. He had no idea that in 13 minutes, now 12, men would force him toward a kitchen exit where Antonio Cardone waited to end his life. Sophia's mind raced through options. Alert security. But the harbor room's security was decorative, meant to handle drunk patrons, not professional killers. Call police? And say what? That she'd read lips describing a murder that hadn't happened yet? Her deafness had taught her that authorities rarely believed what they couldn't verify through their own senses. Tell Marco directly. Approach a Mafia boss and announce he was about to be killed based on a conversation she'd lip-read from across the room. Every option led nowhere good. The clock read 8:49. 11 minutes. Sophia walked to the service station with forced calm, her hands arranging wine glasses that didn't need arranging while her mind calculated angles and timing. The two men at the bar had shifted positions slightly, creating a sightline to Marco's booth while maintaining the appearance of casual drinking. The blonde one checked his watch with deliberate casualness. She could do nothing. Let whatever was about to happen play out while she served desserts and pretended ignorance. That was the smart choice. The survival instinct that had kept her safe through 19 years of navigating a world that hadn't been built for someone like her. But Marco DeLuca had been the first regular customer to learn basic sign language for thank you and please. Simple gestures he'd incorporated so naturally that she'd initially thought them coincidence until she'd caught him studying ASL videos on his phone while waiting for his meal. He'd made himself visible to her in a world where most people treated her like animated furniture. That small kindness, probably meaningless to him, had shifted something in how she moved through her shifts. He'd seen her when others looked through her. The clock read 8:52. 8 minutes. Sophia picked up a serving tray, loading it with deliberate care. Water pitcher, 3 wine glasses, a small vase with fresh flowers. The weight felt substantial in her hands, real and heavy enough to do what needed doing. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard she could feel her pulse in her fingertips, but her hands remained perfectly steady. Years of carrying overloaded trays had built strength most people underestimated. The tray was heavy enough to be convincing, balanced enough to control precisely. She crossed the dining room toward Marco's booth, aware of the 2 men tracking her movement peripherally. Predators noticing prey shifting position, recalculating their approach based on changed variables. 8:54. 6 minutes. Marco looked up as she approached, a question forming in his dark eyes. He hadn't ordered anything. His bourbon sat half full, his water glass still adequate. Her presence at his table broke pattern, and he noticed immediately the same observational precision that had taught him to sign "thank you," now registering that something was wrong. Sophia met his gaze directly for the first time in 3 months of serving him. In her peripheral vision, she saw the blond man straighten slightly at the bar, hand shifting inside his jacket. The other one glanced at the clock, confirming timing. 8:56. 4 minutes. She needed him to understand, needed to communicate danger without speaking, without drawing attention from the men who were watching, waiting, counting down seconds until murder became inevitable. Marco's eyes searched her face, intelligence and wariness combining as he registered her unusual behavior. She saw him catalog the details, her elevated heart rate visible in the pulse at her throat, the carefully controlled expression that wasn't quite succeeding in masking fear, the tray she held with white-knuckled grip. Sophia lifted her free hand, fingers forming signs she'd never used with him before. DANGER. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. Recognition and readiness combining beneath civilized veneer. She signed again, faster now. TWOMENBARKITCHENEXITNINEPM. The clock read 8:57, 3 minutes. Marco's gaze flicked to the bar for a fraction of a second, cataloging the threat without obvious observation. When his eyes returned to hers, she saw calculation replacing curiosity. He understood. Whether he believed her didn't matter. He'd recognized genuine fear and responded to it with the instincts of someone who'd survived by trusting warning signs others missed. 8:58. 2 minutes. The blond man stood up from his bar stool with practiced casualness. His companion followed, both men beginning their coordinated approach toward Marco's booth with the timing of people who'd executed this maneuver before. Sophia didn't think. Thinking led to paralysis, to watching violence unfold while clutching an unused tray. Instead, she let muscle memory take over, the same reflexes that had kept her employed despite countless obstacles stacked against deaf servers in high-end dining. She stepped forward at precisely the wrong angle, her hip catching the corner of Marco's table with calculated force. The tray tilted, tipped, and then gravity claimed it with spectacular inevitability. Water, wine, flowers, and glass cascaded directly into Marco DeLuca's lap, with a crash that seemed to pause all conversation in the restaurant. Burgundy wine spread across his custom suit like blood. Ice water soaked through expensive fabric to the skin beneath. The crystal vase shattered against the booth's leather seat, sending flowers and glass shards across his documents. For a frozen moment, the entire dining room stared. Sophia gasped, her hands flying to her mouth in perfect simulation of horrified accident. She grabbed napkins from the table with trembling fingers, dabbing uselessly at the destruction she'd deliberately created. "I'm so sorry." Her voice came out louder than intended. She could never quite modulate volume correctly. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, Mr. DeLuca. I don't know what happened. The tray just... I'm so sorry." Marco stood with liquid grace despite being soaked through, wine dripping from his suit jacket onto the floor. His expression remained neutral, but she saw approval flash across his features for one brief second before professional irritation replaced it. "It's fine," he said, his voice carrying just enough edge to sell the performance. "Accidents happen." The maître d' materialized with additional napkins and profuse apologies. The manager appeared seconds later, already launching into damage control about cleaning bills and complimentary meals. Other servers rushed over to help clean the spectacular mess, creating chaos and attention exactly where Marco DeLuca sat. The two men from the bar had frozen mid-approach, their coordinated movement toward the booth derailed by unexpected spectacle. The blonde one's hand remained inside his jacket, but pulling a weapon now would mean doing so in front of 40 witnesses and escalating situation surveillance that hadn't existed 10 seconds ago. The clock behind the bar read 8:59. 1 minute. Through the chaos of cleanup and apologies, Sophia caught Marco's gaze. He was watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch, his dark eyes reading the fear she could no longer fully hide. He understood. Not just that she'd warned him, that she'd acted on that warning with split-second timing and spectacular effectiveness. He signed with one hand, hidden by his position. THANKYOU. Security had appeared now, drawn by the commotion. The manager was escorting Marco toward the private dining room to assess damage and arrange cleaning. The two men at the bar exchanged looks that Sophia read perfectly. The moment had passed. Too many eyes, too much attention. Timing destroyed by a clumsy waitress and a ruined suit. They left separately. The blonde one first, then his companion following 90 seconds later. Professional retreat masquerading as boredom, abandoning their hit because the window had closed. 9 p.m. The clock marked the moment that should have been murder, now just another minute in a Tuesday evening gone chaotic. Sophia stood in the wreckage of broken glass and soaked napkins, her hands shaking now that adrenaline had nowhere to go. She'd saved a man's life, pulled a stranger back from death with nothing but observed conversations and a deliberately dropped tray. The manager was apologizing profusely about her clumsiness, already calculating whether to fire her for the incident. Other servers whispered about the spectacular mess, the ruined suit, poor Sophie's terrible luck. No one suspected intention. No one realized they'd just witnessed murder prevention disguised as an accident. Except Marco DeLuca, who watched her from the private dining room doorway with eyes that promised this wasn't finished. Not even close. The harbor room's manager, Gerald, cornered Sophia in the service hallway 20 minutes after the incident. His face had gone the particular shade of red that meant someone important was unhappy, and that someone's unhappiness would roll downhill until it crushed whoever stood at the bottom. "My office. Now." Sophia followed him through the narrow corridor that connected front-of-house elegance to back-of-house reality. The break room they passed still smelled like burnt coffee and someone's microwaved lunch. Her co-workers avoided eye contact as she walked by, already distancing themselves from the server who just dumped an entire tray on the restaurant's most intimidating regular customer. Gerald's office was a cramped square barely large enough for his desk and 2 chairs. Financial reports covered every surface, the permanent chaos of someone managing Charleston's most expensive dining room. He didn't sit, and he didn't offer Sophia a chair. "That suit costs more than you make in 3 months," he said without preamble. "Mr. DeLuca has been a valued patron for nearly a year. He brings business associates who spend thousands, and you just—" Gerald gestured helplessly, words failing to capture the magnitude of disaster. Sophia kept her eyes on his lips, reading each word as it formed. "It was an accident. I caught my hip on the corner of the booth. The tray was already unbalanced from—" "I don't care about the mechanics of your clumsiness." Gerald cut her off, his mouth forming the words with sharp precision. What I care about is damage control. Mr. DeLuca's people have already called twice. They want to discuss the incident. Fear spiked through Sophia's chest, cold and sharp. His people? His assistant. Very professional, very polite, very insistent that you be available tomorrow afternoon for a private discussion about the matter. Gerald's expression had shifted from angry to something else, wariness that bordered on fear. Sophia, I need to know. Is there something going on between you and Mr. DeLuca? What? No. I just serve his table. I barely speak to him. The truth, mostly. She'd learned to sign thank you specifically to communicate with him, but that hardly qualified as something going on. Gerald studied her face, searching for lies. Then why would his people specifically request you for a meeting? Why not go through normal channels and file a complaint with the restaurant? Because Marco DeLuca didn't operate through normal channels. Because men who had other men killed in restaurant kitchens handled problems personally. Because she'd just inserted herself into his world in a way that couldn't be ignored or forgotten. I don't know, Sophia said honestly. Maybe he wants to discuss the cleaning bill directly? Nobody discusses cleaning bills in private meetings. Gerald rubbed his temples, exhaustion replacing anger. Look, I don't know what you've gotten yourself into, but the harbor room can't afford to be involved. If Mr. DeLuca has a problem with you, that's between you and him. But if this becomes public drama, if police get involved, if there's any suggestion of impropriety, you'll fire me. Sophia finished the thought he'd been dancing around. I understand. I'll have to. Gerald's expression held something like sympathy, but not enough to overcome self-preservation. Tomorrow, 2:00. His assistant will send a car to pick you up from your apartment. The address on file is still correct? Sophia nodded, her throat too tight for words. A car sent to her apartment. His people knowing where she lived. The careful separation she'd maintained between work and personal life, dissolving like sugar in hot water. If he offers a settlement for the suit, take it, Gerald advised. Apologize again, be gracious, and maybe this ends quietly. But it wouldn't end quietly. Sophia had seen too much, acted too deliberately. Marco DeLuca knew she'd saved his life, which meant she knew someone had tried to take it. That knowledge made her either valuable or dangerous, and in his world, the line between those two categories was measured in unmarked graves. Sophia's apartment occupied the third floor of a converted warehouse in Charleston's historic district. The building had been transformed into luxury lofts that were really just expensive boxes with exposed brick and plumbing that clanged through the walls. But it was hers, a space she'd earned through countless double shifts and tips saved instead of spent. She climbed the stairs with legs that felt like water, her hands shaking too hard to manage the key on her first attempt. Inside, she locked the door and immediately checked the windows, confirming the fire escape access and sight lines to the street below. Paranoia, maybe. Or maybe just awareness that she'd stepped into something far more dangerous than spilled wine and ruined suits. Her phone sat charging on the kitchen counter. 3 missed calls from her mother, who'd been trying to reach her for days about Thanksgiving plans Sophia couldn't afford to think about right now. 1 text from her roommate Jamie, saying she'd be staying at her boyfriend's place tonight. The apartment felt too quiet without Jamie's constant presence, too much space for Sophia's thoughts to echo and multiply. She made tea she didn't drink, then stood at the window watching the street below for cars that didn't belong, for faces that watched too long. At 11:47 p.m., a black sedan pulled up across from her building and stayed there. Engine off, headlights dark. Sophia watched it for 20 minutes before a man emerged. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit despite the late hour. He leaned against the car and lit a cigarette, his attention fixed on her building's entrance. Not hiding. Not trying to be subtle. A message. We know where you live. Sophia closed the curtains and backed away from the window, her heart hammering. She'd saved Marco DeLuca's life at 8:58 p.m. By midnight, he'd already positioned guards outside her apartment. Protection or intimidation? Maybe both. Sleep came in fragments, her subconscious jerking her awake every hour with invented sounds she couldn't actually hear. The vibration alert on her phone seemed too loud. The refrigerator's hum traveling through the floor felt ominous. By 6 a.m., she gave up and made coffee, watching the sunrise paint Charleston's rooftops in shades of pink and gold that felt like lies. The black sedan remained across the street, a different man leaning against it now. Guard rotation, professional and obvious. At 1:30 p.m., Sophia dressed with care. Dark jeans, a simple gray sweater, minimal makeup. She pulled her hair back in a low ponytail, wanting her face visible, readable. If this meeting went badly, she wanted Marco DeLuca to see her fear, her honesty, whatever slim advantage eye contact might provide. The car arrived at exactly 2 o'clock. Not the black sedan from last night, but a dark blue Mercedes with windows tinted past legal limits. The driver emerged, the same tall man who'd been smoking outside her building at midnight. He opened the rear door without speaking, his face professionally blank. Sophia climbed in before she could reconsider, the leather seat cold through her jeans. The door closed with expensive finality, sealing her inside climate-controlled silence. The privacy screen between front and back seats was raised, isolating her completely. The drive lasted 15 minutes, winding through Charleston's historic district toward the waterfront. They passed Rainbow Row's pastel houses, tourists photographing beauty while oblivious to the darkness operating beneath postcard surfaces. The car turned down a private road Sophia hadn't known existed, trees dripping Spanish moss creating a tunnel of green shadow. The house, calling it a house felt inadequate, sat back from the water on manicured grounds that whispered old money and older power. Brick and white columns, wide verandas, windows that reflected the afternoon sun like blank eyes. Security cameras tracked their approach, visible enough to warn but subtle enough to maintain the property's historic elegance. The driver opened her door, gesturing toward the front entrance where another man in a dark suit waited. No one spoke. Sophia was expected, anticipated, guided through choreography she hadn't rehearsed. Inside, marble floors stretched beneath crystal chandeliers that had probably witnessed centuries of Charleston history. The air smelled like furniture polish and something else. Gun oil, maybe. Or just the particular scent of spaces where violence lived comfortably alongside antique furniture. "Miss Chen, this way, please." The man who spoke wore a suit that fit perfectly, his salt and pepper hair cut military short. He moved like someone who'd been trained to kill efficiently, but his eyes held professional courtesy rather than threat. He led her through rooms that could have been museum installations, historical preservation maintained with obsessive precision. They stopped at a set of double doors. Her escort knocked once, then opened them without waiting for response. Marco DeLuca stood at the window overlooking his gardens, hands clasped behind his back. He'd changed from last night's wine-soaked suit into dark slacks and a white shirt, with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. The casual elegance made him seem both more human and more dangerous, civilization's veneer thin enough to reveal the predator beneath. "Thank you, Vincent. That will be all." His voice carried quiet authority that required no volume. Vincent left, closing the doors with a soft click that sounded like a cell locking. Sophia stood in the center of an office that looked like it belonged to a corporate CEO or a senator. Mahogany desk, leather chairs, bookshelves lined with legal texts and first editions. Nothing suggesting criminal enterprise, yet everything about the space screamed carefully constructed facade. Marco turned from the window, his dark eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. He didn't speak immediately. instead studying her face the way she'd studied his lips countless times across the harbor room's dining room, looking for truth beneath surface presentation. Sophia Chen, he said finally, 23 years old, deaf since age 4 due to meningitis. Graduated top of your high school class despite attending a school with no ASL support. Currently taking night classes at College of Charleston, majoring in criminal justice while working full-time at the harbor room. No criminal record, no traffic violations, no social media presence worth mentioning. You live carefully, quietly, invisibly. Each fact landed like a stone in still water, ripples of violation spreading through Sophia's chest. He'd investigated her. Knew details she'd never shared, pulled her life apart and examined the pieces. Until last night, Marco continued, moving away from the window with predatory grace. When you made yourself very visible by destroying a $5,000 suit to save my life. Sophia's hands clenched at her sides. How did you know? That it was deliberate, I mean. Maybe I really am just clumsy. A smile flickered across his face, there and gone like heat lightning. Clumsy servers don't read lips from across a crowded restaurant. They don't recognize threat assessment in real time and execute split-second interventions with perfect timing. He paused. And they definitely don't sign danger in ASL while maintaining perfect composure under pressure. You knew I was deaf. Not a question. He'd known for months, had learned to sign because of it. I make it my business to know everything about people in my orbit. Marco settled against the edge of his desk, arms crossed. You've served my table for 3 months without incident. You notice details other servers miss. My drink preferences. When I'm waiting for someone who won't arrive, when I'm having a difficult conversation on my phone. You're observant. I appreciate observation. Observation is different from interference. Sophia's voice came out steadier than she felt. I crossed a line last night. You did. No disagreement, just acknowledgement of fact. The question is why. Most people in your position would have looked away. Convinced themselves they'd misread the situation. Self-preservation is human nature, Miss Chen. Yet you chose differently. Sophia thought about lying, creating some noble excuse for her intervention. But Marco DeLuca had just recited her life history from memory. He'd know lies when he heard them. You learned to sign thank you for me, she said simply. 3 months ago you started signing it instead of speaking, because you realized I relied on reading lips, and you wanted to make communication easier. Nobody else at that restaurant has ever bothered. They just speak louder, like volume compensates for my inability to hear. She paused. You saw me when everyone else looked through me. That mattered. Something shifted in Marco's expression, surprise maybe, or recognition of a debt he hadn't realized he'd incurred. So you saved my life because I was polite? The question held amusement rather than mockery. I saved your life because letting someone die when I could prevent it wasn't something I could live with. Sophia met his gaze directly. The fact that you'd been decent to me just made the choice easier. Marco studied her for a long moment, calculation playing out behind his eyes. The men at the bar last night, you read their conversation. You understood they planned to kill me at 9 o'clock, force me toward the kitchen exit where Antonio Cardone waited. That level of detail requires more than casual observation. I've been deaf since I was 4, Sophia explained. I learned to read lips because I had to. By the time I was 7, I could follow conversations. Across a room. By 10, I'd realized most people don't know they're being watched. They say things they shouldn't, reveal secrets they think are hidden. I learned to be invisible because invisible people see everything. And what else have you seen at the harbor room? The question carried weight, testing whether she'd witnessed other transactions, other conversations not meant for outside ears. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. Sophia understood what he was really asking. Are you a threat? Do you know too much? Should I silence you permanently or recruit you? I've seen enough to know Charleston's power structure isn't what appears on city council rosters, she answered carefully. I've seen deals made that never reach official records. I've seen alliances formed between people who publicly claim to be enemies. I've seen money change hands under tables where senators eat lobster. She paused. And I've kept every observation to myself because discretion is how I stay employed in fine dining. Discretion. Marco repeated the word like he was tasting it. A valuable quality. Rare, especially in people your age who've grown up broadcasting every thought on social media. Broadcasting makes you visible. Visible people become targets. Sophia had learned that lesson young, watching how quickly classmates turned cruel when they noticed a difference. I've spent 19 years perfecting invisibility. Last night was the first time I've deliberately made myself seen since I was 4 years old. Marco pushed off from the desk, closing the distance between them with measured steps. He stopped just inside her personal space, not quite threatening, but impossible to ignore. Last night changed things, Miss Chen. You're no longer invisible. The Russo family, the organization that sent those men, they'll review surveillance footage. They'll see you approach my table. They'll see you drop the tray at precisely 8:58. They'll calculate the timing and reach conclusions. His voice dropped lower. And once they conclude you deliberately interfered with their hit, you become a problem they need to solve. Fear crystallized in Sophia's chest, sharp and cold. They'll come for me. They already have people watching your building. I pulled them back, replaced them with my own security. Marco's expression remained neutral, but something like concern flickered in his eyes. You saved my life, which means I owe you a debt. In my world, debts are sacred. They must be repaid in full. I don't want money. Sophia's hands clenched at her sides. I don't want to be part of whatever world you operate in. I just want to finish my degree and live quietly. Too late. The words held finality. You entered my world the moment you signed danger and dropped that tray. Now we both have to navigate the consequences. Silence stretched between them, weighted with implications Sophia didn't fully understand, but instinctively feared. What happens now? She asked finally. Marco moved to his desk, extracting a key from his pocket and unlocking a drawer. He pulled out a sleek black phone, expensive, probably encrypted, definitely not available at any retail store. Now I ensure you survive the attention your heroism has attracted. He held out the phone. This is a secure line. It connects directly to my head of security. If you sense danger, anything unusual, anyone watching, any situation that feels wrong, you call. Vincent will have people there within minutes. Sophia took the phone with trembling hands, its weight substantial and foreign. And in exchange? Nobody provides protection without expecting something in return. A slight smile touched Marco's lips. Perceptive. Yes, there's an exchange. I need your particular skills. I'm a waitress studying criminal justice. I don't have skills worth. You read lips from across crowded rooms, Marco interrupted. You notice patterns others miss. You assess threats in real time and execute decisive action under pressure. Those skills are exactly what I need. Sophia's stomach tightened. You want me to spy for you. I want you to observe. Marco's tone shifted, becoming more businesslike. I attend meetings, dinners, negotiations. People speak freely around waitstaff, assuming silence and discretion. But you see conversations others don't, hear secrets whispered behind hands. That information is valuable. You're asking me to betray every person whose private conversation I've witnessed. The accusation came out sharper than intended. I'm asking you to survive. Marco's voice hardened. The Russo family won't stop because you want to live quietly. They don't accept interference, and they make examples of people who cross them. Your options are limited. Accept my protection and provide the service I require, or refuse, and hope you're better at staying hidden than the Russos are at finding people. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. Sophia had understood that the moment she'd dropped the tray, had known with certainty when she'd seen the guard outside her apartment. She'd traded invisibility for Marco DeLuca's life, and now she'd pay the price of being seen. If I agree, she said slowly, I need conditions. Marco's eyebrow raised slightly. You're negotiating? I'm establishing boundaries. Sophia's voice found strength she didn't quite feel. I'll observe and report what I see in professional settings, but I won't target specific people. I won't help you hurt anyone who doesn't pose a direct threat. And I continue my education. My classes, my degree. That's non-negotiable. For a long moment, Marco simply watched her. Then he extended his hand. Agreed. You have my word that your education continues uninterrupted. And I only target people who've already chosen to be my enemies. I don't create problems, Miss Chen. I solve them. Sophia took his hand, feeling calluses that confirmed her suspicions about violence living beneath civilized surfaces. His grip was firm but not crushing, the handshake of someone who didn't need to prove strength through pressure. How does this work? She asked. Do I quit the harbor room? Move somewhere safer? You continue exactly as before. Marco released her hand. Same apartment, same job, same routine. The Russos are watching for changes in pattern. Running makes you look guilty, confirms their suspicions. Instead, you maintain normalcy while my security operates invisibly around you. Invisible guards. The irony wasn't lost on Sophia. I've spent 19 years being invisible. Now I have invisible protection because I made myself visible. Life has a way of complicating simple categories. Marco returned to the window, his attention shifting to the gardens below. Starting tomorrow, you'll notice a blue Honda Civic parked near your building. The driver is Maya Restrepo, former Secret Service, currently my most trusted security specialist. She'll maintain distance but stay close enough to respond if needed. You're assigning me a bodyguard. I'm repaying a debt. Marco turned back to face her. 3 months ago, you noticed I'd learned to sign for you. That observation mattered enough to influence your decision last night. Consider this my return observation. I notice when someone saves my life at great personal risk. That matters too. Sophia clutched the encrypted phone, its weight both reassurance and burden. The Russo family. How long until they make a move? Days. Maybe a week. They'll investigate first, confirm their suspicions, plan carefully. The Russos are thorough, which buys us time to prepare. Marco's expression hardened. But make no mistake, Miss Chen, they will come for you. The only question is whether you'll be ready when they do. The blue Honda Civic appeared the next morning, parked across from Sophia's building with a woman behind the wheel who looked like she'd stepped out of a fitness magazine. Maya Restrepo had dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, athletic build obvious even sitting down, and eyes that tracked movement with professional precision. Sophia pretended not to notice her as she left for her morning run, the routine she'd maintained for 2 years. The harbor room didn't open until 5 p.m., which left her days free for classes and the exercise that kept her anxiety manageable. Maya followed at a discreet distance, her running form suggesting military training. Former Secret Service, Marco had said. Sophia wondered what circumstances had brought a federal agent into a Mafia boss's employ, what compromises or revelations had shifted her allegiance from law enforcement to organized crime. Charleston's morning heat built quickly, humidity making the air feel substantial. Sophia ran along the waterfront, past historical markers and, PD tourist information boards through a city built on slavery and piracy, now packaged as genteel southern charm. Every city had hidden histories, she supposed. Charleston's were just better preserved. Her phone buzzed halfway through her run, the encrypted one Marco had given her, not her regular iPhone. Sophia slowed to a walk, pulling the device from her armband. A text from an unknown number. Vincent Castellano, Marco's head of security. Maya reports you're establishing routine patterns. Good. Predictability creates baselines that make anomalies visible. Continue your normal schedule. Sophia typed back. Being predictable seems dangerous if people are watching for me. The response came within seconds. Predictable routines with invisible protection are safer than erratic behavior that signals awareness. Trust the process. Trust the process. Trust that invisible guards would protect her from enemies she couldn't see. Trust that Marco DeLuca's word meant something in a world built on violence and betrayal. Sophia pocketed the phone and resumed running, aware of Maya maintaining her distance behind. The bodyguard's presence should have felt intrusive, but instead, Sophia found strange comfort in not being alone for the first time in years. Her criminal justice class that afternoon covered organized crime structures, hierarchy, territory, the economics of illegal enterprise. Professor Davidson lectured about the Mafia's decline in the digital age, how modern criminal organizations had adapted to surveillance and prosecution by fragmenting power structures, making individuals harder to target. Sophia took notes with new understanding, academic theory illuminated by practical experience. The Russo family's hit on Marco DeLuca represented power consolidation, eliminating a rival to claim his territory, his operations, his influence. She'd disrupted that consolidation with a dropped tray and perfect timing. Now she was a variable in an equation that wouldn't balance until someone removed her from it. After class, Sophia found Maya waiting in the parking lot, leaning against the Honda with casual confidence. The bodyguard straightened as Sophia approached, her expression professional, but not unfriendly. "Miss Chen, I'm Maya Restrepo." She extended her hand, the grip firm and direct. "Marco asked me to introduce myself officially rather than continue shadowing you without acknowledgement." Sophia shook her hand, noting the calluses and the way Maya's eyes constantly scan their surroundings even during conversation. Former Secret Service. That's a significant career change. Protection work is protection work. Maya's expression remained neutral. The difference is who I'm protecting and why. Marco offers better pay and doesn't require me to pretend politicians deserve saving. Cynical perspective from someone who used to protect presidents. Realistic perspective from someone who's seen how power actually operates. Maya gestured toward her car. "I can drive you to work or follow you there if you prefer maintaining your own transportation. Either way, I'll be close." Sophia considered her options. Following seems less obvious. "Agreed, I'll maintain a 2-car buffer unless circumstances require closer proximity." Maya pulled a business card from her pocket. Simple white cardstock with just a phone number. "This reaches me directly. If your encrypted phone is compromised or unavailable, use this." "How many people are protecting me?" Sophia studied the card, memorizing the number before pocketing it. "Depends on threat level and your location. Right now, just me during daytime hours. Mateo covers nights. You saw him outside your building the first night. When you're at work, Vincent coordinates additional security since the harbor room is a known location for potential confrontation." Maya paused. "We're good at being invisible, Miss Chen. You won't notice us until you need to." The harbor room felt different when Sophia arrived for her shift. Same elegant dining room, same classical music filtering through expensive speakers, same precise choreography of fine dining service. But now she noticed what she'd previously dismissed. The corner table where 2 men in suits lingered over coffee for 3 hours without ordering food. the bartender who tracked every entrance with military precision, the sommelier whose phone buzzed every time a new patron arrived, Marco's people, security disguised as normal patrons and staff, watching for threats while maintaining the restaurant's refined atmosphere. Gerald pulled Sophia aside during pre-service setup, his expression anxious. "Everything okay? With Mr. DeLuca, I mean. After the incident." "Everything's fine." He was very understanding. The lie came easily, smoothed by practice. "Good. That's good." Gerald relaxed fractionally. "He called personally to say he doesn't hold you responsible. Even increased his reservation frequency. He'll be dining here Tuesdays and Thursdays now instead of just Tuesdays." Increased surveillance, Sophia understood. Marco establishing more regular presence to maintain security coverage, making his protection of her look natural rather than suspicious. She tied her apron and checked her section. Tables, 4 through 8 tonight, plus Marco's corner booth. Same station as always. No changes to draw attention. The evening service started slow, building toward the typical Tuesday dinner rush. Sophia moved through familiar routines, delivering bread baskets and pouring water, reading lips and cataloging conversations out of habit and newly contracted obligation. Table 4. Investment bankers discussing a merger that hadn't been publicly announced. Sophia filed the information away, potentially valuable, depending on Marco's interests. Table 6. A couple's anniversary dinner. 40 years of marriage celebrated with expensive wine and gentle bickering about whether their daughter should marry her long-time boyfriend. Nothing useful, just human moments happening at tables where secrets usually lived. Table 7. 2 women comparing notes on their plastic surgeons, discussing procedures with clinical detail that made Sophia's stomach turn. Also useless, but she noticed everything now, unable to turn off the observation that had become both survival skill and commodity. Marco arrived at 7:30, precisely on schedule. He wore a navy suit tonight, no tie, looking like any successful businessman enjoying a solo dinner. But Sophia saw the bodyguard who entered 30 seconds before him, the other who followed 90 seconds after, the way Vincent positioned himself at the bar with sightlines covering the entire dining room. "Good evening, Mr. DeLuca." Sophia placed his bourbon, Blanton's, 2 fingers, single ice sphere, without needing to ask. "Your usual table is ready." "Thank you, Miss Chen." He signed it as he spoke, the gesture so smooth that most people wouldn't notice both communication methods happening simultaneously. As she turned to leave, his hand moved in quick ASL. "Anything unusual today?" Sophia signed back. "One car followed me from campus, lost it on King Street." Marco's expression didn't change, but his hand shifted to touch his phone, alerting Vincent to investigate. The exchange took 3 seconds, invisible to anyone not watching specifically for it. Throughout the evening service, Sophia maintained her routine while deploying her skills toward Marco's interests. She read conversations at nearby tables, noting names and details that might matter. A city councilman discussing zoning changes that would benefit specific developers. A shipping executive complaining about increased scrutiny from customs inspectors. A lawyer celebrating a case dismissal that shouldn't have been dismissed based on evidence presented. Each observation went into her mental file, details she'd relay later through the encrypted phone. She was a spy now, she realized with discomfort that was slowly giving way to acceptance. Not for government or justice, but for survival and debt repayment measured in protected breaths. At 8:15, 3 men entered the harbor room with the same wrong-fit suits and predatory awareness she'd noticed a week ago. Different faces, same organization. Russo family, almost certainly. Sophia felt ice flood her veins as they were seated at table 12, not her section, thank God, but close enough to watch. Close enough to send a message. She caught Vincent's eye across the room. He'd already noticed, his posture shifting from relaxed to alert. The bodyguards who'd arrived with Marco repositioned slightly, creating protective angles without obvious movement. Marco's expression remained impassive as he cut into his swordfish, but Sophia saw tension in his shoulders, readiness coiled beneath civilized dining. The three men ordered scotch they didn't drink and steaks they barely touched, their attention fixed on Marco's booth with unsubtle intensity. One of them, broad-shouldered with a shaved head, made eye contact with Sophia and held it for 5 long seconds. Recognition and threat combined in that look, a promise that her interference hadn't been forgotten. Sophia forced herself to look away, to continue serving Table 6's anniversary couple with hands that trembled slightly. The encrypted phone felt heavy in her apron pocket, Vincent's number programmed for instant access. At 8:40, the three men stood and left without paying, their departure as pointed as their arrival. The message delivered. We know you. We're watching. We're coming. Maya appeared at Sophia's elbow, seeming to materialize from nowhere. Your shift ends in 20 minutes. I'm driving you home tonight. Non-negotiable. Sophia nodded, not trusting her voice. Marco settled his bill at 8:45 as usual, leaving his standard 20% tip. As Sophia cleared his table, she found a note tucked under his napkin. They're testing your response, measuring fear. Don't give them the satisfaction. You're protected. She pocketed the note and finished her shift with mechanical efficiency, hyper-aware of every entrance, every new face, every anomaly in the restaurant's carefully maintained normally. When her shift ended, Maya escorted her to the Honda with professional vigilance. Another car followed them, Mateo probably, providing additional security. They drove through Charleston's historic district, past houses that had witnessed centuries of violence dressed as civilization. The men at table 12, Maya said without preamble. Vincent identified them as Russo associates, junior level, sent to intimidate rather than eliminate. The family is still gathering information, building their case before acting. How long do I have? Sophia asked. Days, maybe a week. But Marco's already making countermoves. This chess game has several rounds left before checkmate. Maya pulled up outside Sophia's building. Get some sleep. Tomorrow stays normal. Classes, run, work. We maintain the pattern. Sophia climbed out of the car, exhausted and wired simultaneously. Mateo's vehicle was already positioned across the street, her night shift protection visible enough to deter casual threats. Inside her apartment, Sophia locked the door and leaned against it, feeling the weight of her new reality settle over her shoulders like a physical burden. She'd saved a life and sold her own in the process, trading invisibility for surveillance, quiet existence for dangerous alliance. The encrypted phone buzzed with a message from Marco. You did well tonight. Maintaining composure under pressure is half of survival. The other half is trusting the people watching your back. Sleep well, Miss Chen. Tomorrow, we begin teaching you how to truly see what others miss. Sophia stared at the message, understanding its implication. Marco wasn't just protecting her, he was training her, developing her skills, investing in an asset he'd decided was worth keeping. She'd become exactly what she'd feared, visible, valuable, and vulnerable. But she was alive. For now, that would have to be enough. The training started the next afternoon in Marco's library, a room lined floor to ceiling with books that looked read rather than decorative. Sophia sat across from him at a massive oak table while Vincent stood near the door, his presence a reminder that education and protection operated on parallel tracks. You notice details naturally, Marco said, sliding a photograph across the table. But natural observation needs structure to become actionable intelligence. Tell me what you see. The photo showed a restaurant scene, not the harbor room, somewhere else. 4 men at a table, wine glasses and plates suggesting a business dinner. Sophia studied their faces, their posture, the space between them. The man on the left is in charge, she said slowly. His chair is positioned differently, angled to see the entire room. The others orient toward him unconsciously, body language showing deference. She pointed to another figure. This one is nervous. His fingers are drumming the table and he's not making eye contact with anyone. Either he's about to betray someone or he's already been caught. Good. Marco's approval felt disproportionately satisfying. What else? Sophia looked closer, noticing details she'd almost missed. The wine bottle. It's positioned closest to the nervous man, but his glass is empty while everyone else's is full. They're deliberately excluding him from the group dynamic. He's already been judged. Within a week of that photo being taken, the nervous man disappeared. Marco retrieved the photograph. The Cardone family found out he'd been skimming from their casino operations. They invited him to dinner to confirm their suspicions through exactly the kind of behavioral tells you just identified. The casual mention of murder made Sophia's stomach turn. You're teaching me to spot dead men walking. I'm teaching you to survive by understanding patterns before they complete. Marco pulled out another photo. In my world, observation is currency. The person who sees danger first lives longest. They spent 2 hours reviewing photographs, Marco testing her ability to read situations from static images. Business meetings where everyone smiled but body language screamed hostility. Restaurant dinners where seating arrangements revealed power hierarchies. Candid shots of men whose faces held violence barely restrained by expensive suits. You're a natural, Vincent observed after Sophia correctly identified an undercover federal agent in a group photo. Most people I train take weeks to spot law enforcement. You saw it immediately. His shoes, Sophia explained. Everyone else is wearing designer brands, but his are practical, good for running, and his watch is too cheap for the company he's keeping. Details that don't match the role he's playing. Marco and Vincent exchanged a look that Sophia couldn't quite decipher. Starting next week, Marco said, you'll attend certain dinners with me, not as staff, as my guest. People speak differently around couples than they do around men dining alone. Your deafness becomes an advantage. They'll assume you can't hear their conversations, won't realize you're reading every word their mouths form. Sophia felt her pulse spike. You want me to pretend to be your… what, exactly? Companion. Associate. The exact nature of our relationship remains deliberately ambiguous, which makes you simultaneously visible and invisible. People will see you, acknowledge your presence, and then dismiss you as decorative rather than functional. Marco's expression held something that might have been apology. I won't pretend it's not using you, but you're already a target. This gives you proximity to protection and purpose beyond simply hiding. What if I'm recognized? The Russo family saw me at the harbor room. Let them see you. Marco leaned back in his chair. Let them know you're under my explicit protection. Sometimes the safest position is directly beside the person your enemies fear most. The next week passed in a blur of routine punctuated by training sessions. Sophia attended her criminal justice classes with new understanding, her professor's lectures on organized crime illuminated by practical experience. She ran her morning routes with Maya shadowing her, the bodyguard's presence becoming familiar enough to feel almost companionable. She worked her shifts at the harbor room, reading conversations and filing details away for later reporting. And every afternoon, she spent 2 hours in Marco's library, learning to see what others missed. Micro-expressions, Marco explained during one session, showing her video footage of various business meetings. People can control their words, their tone, even their posture. But micro-expressions, the flickers of emotion that cross faces in fractions of seconds, those are involuntary. Learn to spot them, and you'll know what people feel regardless of what they say. Sophia watched the screen as a man smiled while discussing a partnership, but for just an instant, his expression twisted into something like disgust before smoothing back into professional courtesy. He hated the deal, she said, Whatever he agreed to, he did it under duress, or for reasons beyond what was being discussed. The Castellano family was forcing him to sell his shipping company to cover gambling debts. Marco froze the frame on that micro-expression of disgust. He smiled, signed the papers, and 3 months later disappeared, rather than live under our thumb. Some people would rather die than operate without autonomy. The casual mention of another death, this one preventable through better observation, sent a chill through Sophia's chest. You could have predicted he'd run. I did predict it. I let him anyway. Marco's expression remained neutral. Some debts can't be collected without destroying the debtor. Better to let them go than waste resources chasing ghosts. Sophia studied his face, looking for the micro-expressions he'd taught her to notice. She caught something in the slight tightening around his eyes. Regret? Maybe? Or the weight of decisions that had accumulated over years of operating in moral gray zones. You didn't want him dead, she realized aloud. I rarely want anyone dead. Marco closed the laptop, but wanting and necessity often occupy different territories. The Castellano family needed satisfaction for the debt. I provided an exit that looked like enforcement. Everyone maintained face, and a man who couldn't live under our control found freedom in disappearance. That's not how my criminal justice textbooks describe organized crime. Your textbooks describe prosecutable crimes, not human motivations. Marco stood, moving to the window overlooking his gardens. The Mafia exists because legitimate society creates vacuums, needs unmet, services prohibited, protections unavailable through legal channels. We fill those vacuums. Sometimes with violence, yes, but more often with negotiation, mediation, practical solutions to problems the law can't or won't address. Sophia joined him at the window, watching gardeners tend roses that probably cost more than her monthly rent. You're justifying. I'm providing context. Marco glanced at her. You saved my life, which suggests you saw something worth saving. I'd like to believe your instincts were correct. The vulnerability in that admission surprised her. Marco DeLuca, who commanded an organization through fear and respect in equal measure, cared what she thought of him. The realization shifted something in her chest, complicated emotions she didn't want to examine too closely. My instinct said a man who learned sign language for his deaf waitress deserved not to die in a restaurant kitchen. Sophia said quietly, everything else is still complicated. Complicated I can work with. Marco's expression softened almost imperceptibly. It's certainty that creates problems. People absolutely convinced of their rightness become dangerous regardless of which side of the law they occupy. The dinner invitation came on a Thursday, delivered via the encrypted phone. Tomorrow evening, Osteria Lucano, 8 p.m. Wear something elegant. You're attending as my guest. Sophia stared at the message, her stomach tightening with anxiety that had nothing to do with danger and everything to do with implications. A public dinner as Marco DeLuca's companion meant crossing another line, making visible an association that couldn't be easily explained or dismissed. She texted back, "What's the objective?" The response came quickly. The Marchetti family is negotiating territory agreements. They'll say one thing publicly while their body language reveals true intentions. I need your eyes reading what their mouths don't say. Vincent will brief you on key players tomorrow afternoon. Sophia had nothing elegant in her closet. Her wardrobe consisted of work uniforms, running clothes, and jeans suitable for college classes. The problem was solved when a garment bag appeared at her apartment the next morning, delivered by Maya with a note. Consider this work attire, M. The dress inside was simple, but exquisite. Deep blue silk that draped elegantly without being overtly sexual. Sophisticated enough for high-end dining without screaming expensive. Shoes that actually fit. Jewelry that looked real because it probably was. Maya waited while Sophia tried everything on, her expression professionally approving. You clean up well. Marco has good instincts for these things. The dress is elegant but not intimidating. You'll fit perfectly in Osteria Lucano's atmosphere. I've never been anywhere that requires this level of dress code. Sophia studied herself in the mirror, barely recognizing the elegant woman staring back. I don't know how to be this person. You're not being anyone except yourself in better clothes. Maya adjusted the necklace Sophia had put on slightly crooked. Just watch. Listen. Well, watch. And do what you do naturally. Marco trusts your instincts. Trust them too. Vincent's briefing that afternoon covered 7 key players who'd be attending the Marchetti dinner. The family patriarch, his 2 sons, the consigliere, who actually ran operations, and 3 captains representing different territorial interests. Vincent showed her photos, provided background on each man's personality and position within the organization. Giuseppe Marchetti, the patriarch, suffers from early-stage dementia, Vincent explained, pointing to an elderly man in one photo. His sons are positioning for succession, which makes this negotiation particularly volatile. The elder son, Tommaso, is traditional, loyal to old codes, resistant to change. The younger Luca is aggressive, wants to expand into territories the old guard considers off-limits. Sophia studied the faces, committing details to memory. Who does Marco prefer as successor? Neither. Both create problems for our interests. Vincent pulled up another photo. But Tommaso's traditionalism is predictable. Luca's aggression is dangerous. He's the one who authorized the hit on Marco last month. Your interference humiliated him personally. Ice water replaced blood in Sophia's veins. Luca Marchetti will be at this dinner? Seated 3 chairs from you. Vincent's expression held grim certainty. He knows who you are, knows what you did. The question is whether he'll act on that knowledge in a public setting with his father present, or wait for a more private opportunity. And if he does act, then Marco's security protocol activates, and you discover exactly how much firepower we position around you during high-risk events. Vincent closed his laptop. But more likely, Luca will watch, calculate, wait. He's impulsive compared to his brother, but not stupid. Making a move against Marco's companion at a neutral negotiation would start a war his family can't currently afford. The reassurance felt thin, stretched over implications that made Sophia's hands shake. She was bait and observer simultaneously, her presence serving multiple functions in a game whose rules she was still learning. Marco picked her up at 7:30, arriving in a black Audi that probably cost more than her college education. He emerged from the driver's side wearing a charcoal suit that made him look like he'd stepped out of a fashion magazine, though the slight bulge under his left shoulder suggested the gun that lived beneath civilized presentation. His expression when he saw her shifted, surprise giving way to appreciation so subtle she almost missed it. "You look beautiful, Miss Chen." He opened the passenger door, the gesture formal despite intimate implications. The dress was a good choice. Sophia slid into leather seats that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "Thank you for providing appropriate camouflage." Camouflage suggests hiding. This is tactical presentation. You look exactly right for the role we're playing tonight. Marco settled into the driver's seat, his movements efficient and controlled. Vincent briefed you on the players? Giuseppe and his sons, the consigliere, 3 captains. Luca Marchetti wants me dead for interfering with his hit. Tommaso prefers traditional approaches. Sophia recited the information like studying for an exam. The real question is whether Giuseppe still controls enough of his faculties to enforce his decisions, or if his sons are already operating independently while maintaining the fiction of his authority. Marco pulled into traffic, navigating Charleston's evening congestion with practiced ease. Very good. That's exactly the dynamic I need you to assess. Watch Giuseppe when his sons speak. Does he react with understanding or confusion? Does he defer to them or assert authority? The balance of power within the Marchetti family determines how I negotiate tonight. They drove in silence for several minutes, the city sliding past in familiar patterns transformed by evening light. Sophia noticed the car following them, one of Marco's security team, maintaining protective distance. I need to ask something. Sophia kept her eyes forward, finding courage in not having to meet his gaze. If this goes wrong tonight, if Luca decides to act despite the risks, will you sacrifice me to maintain peace with the Marchetti family? The car slowed as Marco pulled to the curb, putting it in park despite being blocks from their destination. He turned to face her fully, his expression more open than she'd ever seen it. If Luca Marchetti or anyone else makes a move against you, I will respond with everything I have, regardless of political consequences. His voice carried absolute conviction. You saved my life. That debt doesn't disappear because honoring it becomes inconvenient. You're under my protection, Sophia. That's not a negotiable position. The use of her first name, the first time he'd spoken it rather than signing it, landed with unexpected intimacy. Sophia met his eyes, searching for deception and finding only steady certainty. Why does my life matter so much to you? The question emerged softer than intended. In your world, people die all the time. Why am I different? Marco considered his answer carefully, his gaze never leaving hers. Because you had nothing to gain and everything to lose, and you acted anyway. Because in a world built on calculated self-interest, you chose compassion without expecting reward. Because he paused, something vulnerable crossing his features. Because someone who sees me as worth saving is rare enough to protect with everything I have. The honesty in his admission stole Sophia's breath. She understood suddenly that this wasn't just about debt or obligation. Marco DeLuca, who commanded an organization through fear and respect, had been genuinely surprised that someone would risk themselves to save him. That surprise had transformed into something deeper, something neither of them had quite acknowledged yet. We should go, Sophia said finally, not trusting herself to respond to the implications hanging between them. We're going to be late. Marco shifted the car back into drive, the moment passing but its weight remaining. One more thing. Tonight, we'll be seated close enough that you can read the Marchetti family's conversations, but you'll need to be subtle. Lip reading obvious enough to notice defeats the purpose. Can you observe without being caught observing? I've been doing it for 19 years. Sophia adjusted the necklace that suddenly felt too tight. Invisible observation is my specialty. You're many things, Sophia. Invisible isn't one of them anymore. Osteria Lucano occupied a converted warehouse in Charleston's historic district. Brick and exposed beams transformed into upscale Italian dining. The restaurant's private room had been reserved for tonight's negotiation, a space separate from the main dining area, where business could be conducted without civilian witnesses. Marco's hand settled at the small of Sophia's back as they entered, the gesture proprietary enough to signal their relationship without being overtly possessive. She felt the weight of eyes tracking their movement, security assessing threat levels, family members cataloging information, Luca Marchetti's gaze burning with barely restrained hostility. Giuseppe Marchetti sat at the head of the table, diminished by age but still commanding presence through sheer force of history. He'd run Charleston's Italian operations for 40 years, surviving federal investigations and rival attempts at consolidation through cunning that age was slowly eroding. Tommaso Marchetti stood as they approached, extending his hand to Marco with formal courtesy. DeLuca, thank you for coming. His English carried traces of Italian accent despite decades in America, tradition maintained through linguistic choice. Giuseppe Tommaso Luca. Marco greeted each man with appropriate deference to hierarchy. May I introduce Sophia Chen, my associate. Associate, the designation deliberately ambiguous, allowing each person to interpret their relationship according to their own assumptions. Sophia shook hands with practiced grace, reading each man's lips as they exchanged pleasantries. Tommaso was formal, his greeting perfunctory but polite. Luca's handshake lasted a fraction too long, his grip just slightly too firm, a message delivered through pressure and duration. Miss Chen. Luca's smile didn't reach his eyes. I've heard interesting things about you. Quite the clumsy waitress from what I understand. The barely veiled accusation hung in the air. Marco's hand tightened imperceptibly at Sophia's back, warning and reassurance combined. I'm better at reading situations than carrying trays. Sophia replied calmly, meeting Luca's gaze directly. Some skills matter more than others. Giuseppe laughed, the sound rough with age and cigarettes. She's got fire, this one. I like her already. He gestured to the empty seats. Sit, sit. We have business to discuss, but first we eat. No negotiations on empty stomachs. Civilized men share meals before money. They settled around the table, Marco positioning Sophia at his right with sightlines covering most of the Marchetti family. Security personnel flanked both groups, Vincent and two others for Marco, 4 men for the Marchettis. The private room suddenly felt crowded, testosterone and threat competing for dominance. Wine appeared, poured by waitstaff who moved with the trained invisibility Sophia knew intimately. The first course arrived, antipasti arranged with artistic precision, food as theater in a performance where everyone played multiple roles. Giuseppe dominated the initial conversation, telling stories from the old days when territory was claimed through violence rather than negotiation. His sons listened with practiced patience, but Sophia caught the glances they exchanged, concern mixed with calculation. The patriarch's stories wandered, details becoming confused, timelines merging events from different decades. Papa, Tommaso interjected gently when Giuseppe confused a story from the 80s with something that had happened last year. That was the Cardone situation, not the Russo negotiation. Irritation flashed across Giuseppe's face, quickly suppressed. I know what I'm talking about. I was there. You weren't even born yet. Of course, Papa. Tommaso's deference was automatic, but his expression held resignation. Sophia read the dynamic instantly, the son correcting his father's deteriorating memory while trying to preserve the old man's dignity. Luca showed less patience, his jaw tightening each time Giuseppe's narrative wandered. He wanted his father off the board, Sophia realized, wanted the old guard retired so he could implement his own vision without obstruction. The meal progressed through multiple courses while conversation circled the real purpose of their gathering. Marco participated minimally, his responses measured and diplomatic, revealing nothing substantive. Sophia stayed quiet, playing the role of decorative companion while her eyes tracked every conversation, every gesture, every micro-expression that revealed what words concealed. At the third course, business finally emerged from social pretense. The port expansion, Giuseppe said, his attention sharpening with focus that suggested his cognitive decline was inconsistent rather than constant. The city's investing $50 million in new infrastructure. Those contracts will be valuable. Construction, labor, ongoing operations. Big enough to share, but someone needs to coordinate distribution to avoid conflict. The Marchetti family has historically controlled port access, Tommaso added, his tone suggesting this was established fact rather than negotiable territory. But we recognize that modern operations require broader cooperation. Luca leaned forward, his body language aggressive despite his brother's diplomatic phrasing. What my brother means is that we're willing to negotiate terms, but the port remains our territory. Any operation DeLuca wants to run goes through us, with appropriate tribute paid for access. Marco sipped his wine, his expression revealing nothing. Tribute suggests subordination. I prefer partnership, equal investment, equal return, decisions made through consensus rather than hierarchy. Partnership works when parties bring equal assets to the table. Luca's voice carried an edge that made Vincent shift slightly in his peripheral position. The Marchetti family has owned port access for 40 years. What does DeLuca bring beyond ambition and recent expansion into territories you've acquired through questionable means? The accusation was clear. Marco had been consolidating power through aggression rather than negotiation, upsetting traditional balances that had maintained peace. Questionable means. Marco's voice remained calm, but Sophia felt tension radiating from him like heat. You mean surviving the hit your family authorized? The attempt on my life that Miss Chen here so gracefully disrupted? The room went silent. Giuseppe's expression shifted from confusion to sharp focus, his cognitive fog clearing as implications registered. What hit? The patriarch's voice carried authority that age hadn't fully eroded. Luca, what is he talking about? Luca's jaw worked, trapped between denying knowledge and admitting unauthorized action. A preemptive response to DeLuca's expansion into shipping territories we'd clearly claimed. Without my authorization. Giuseppe's fist hit the table, making glasses jump. You ordered a hit on a made man without family approval? Are you insane? You weren't capable of making strategic decisions. Luca's control finally cracked, frustration spilling into open rebellion. You can barely remember what you had for breakfast, yet you're still pretending to run operations that need decisive leadership. Tommaso stood abruptly. Luca, enough. No, not enough. Luca rounded on his brother. You want to maintain the old man's fiction because it keeps you in control by default. But I see what's actually happening. Our family's losing ground while you play nursemaid to dementia. The words hung in the air like gunpowder, volatile and impossible to retract. Giuseppe's face had gone pale, shock and rage combining in an expression that reminded everyone in the room that he'd once been feared across 3 states. Sophia watched the family implode, reading the micro-expressions that revealed each man's true feelings beneath surface presentation. Giuseppe's hurt underneath the anger, a proud man confronting the loss of faculties that had defined him. Tommaso's resigned acceptance. He'd known this confrontation was coming, had probably dreaded it for months. And Luca's desperate ambition, the younger son who'd grown tired of waiting for inheritance. Marco remained perfectly still, letting the Marchetti family's dysfunction play out without interference. This was the information he'd needed. Confirmation that the family was fractured. Giuseppe's authority questioned. Succession in dispute. Any agreement made tonight would be worthless once the patriarch died or was forced into retirement. Gentlemen, Marco's voice cut through rising tension with quiet authority. Perhaps we should postpone substantive negotiations until family matters are resolved. I have no interest in agreements that won't survive internal succession disputes. Giuseppe's attention snapped to Marco, calculation visible behind elderly features. You're right, DeLuca. This dinner was premature. He pushed back from the table with effort, age making the movement laborious. Tommaso, Luca, we'll discuss family business privately. This negotiation is over. The Marchetti patriarch shuffled out, flanked by his sons and security. Tommaso threw an apologetic glance over his shoulder. Luca's expression promised retribution, his gaze lingering on Sophia with enough hostility to make Vincent step forward protectively. The door closed behind them, leaving Marco and Sophia alone except for their security team. Well, Marco said quietly, that was informative. They didn't speak during the drive back to Marco's estate. Sophia watched Charleston slide past the windows, processing everything she'd observed during the dinner. The family dysfunction, Luca's barely controlled rage, the power vacuum Giuseppe's decline was creating. Inside Marco's library, Vincent was already reviewing security footage from Osteria Lucano on multiple monitors. He looked up as they entered. The Marchetti family is fragmenting faster than our intelligence suggested, he reported. Giuseppe's dementia is advanced enough that Luca's openly challenging his authority. Tommaso's trying to hold things together, but he's fighting against his brother's ambition and his father's decline simultaneously, which makes them vulnerable. Marco loosened his tie, shedding the formality he'd maintained throughout dinner. A divided family can't maintain territorial control effectively. Sophia found herself studying Marco with the same observational skills he'd taught her. You're going to move against them. I'm going to position myself to fill the vacuum they're creating. Marco met her gaze directly. Giuseppe Marchetti built an empire over 40 years. But empires crumble when succession is unclear and internal conflict destroys unity. I didn't create their dysfunction, Sophia. I'm simply recognizing the opportunity it presents. And Luca? He won't accept being marginalized quietly. Luca's aggression is his weakness. Marco pulled up security footage showing Luca's expression during dinner. Rage barely controlled, hostility obvious. He's already shown himself willing to act without family approval. That makes him predictable and eventually disposable to his own organization. Vincent cleared his throat. There's a complication. Our surveillance picked up Luca, making calls immediately after leaving Osteria Lucano. He's activated a crew, 4 men we've identified as his personal enforcers rather than family soldiers. Sophia felt ice spread through her chest. He's coming for me. He's going to try. Marco's voice hardened. Vincent, activate Protocol Fortress. I want Sophia's building secured, her routes monitored, visible deterrent established. Already done. Maya's repositioning to inside the building, Mateo's securing the parking garage, and I'm putting 2 additional teams on rotation. Vincent's fingers moved across his keyboard, implementing security measures with practiced efficiency. Marco turned to Sophia. You're staying here tonight. Your apartment isn't defensible against a coordinated assault. I have class tomorrow morning. You have survival as your priority. Marco's tone left no room for argument. Luca's crew will expect you to return home. When you don't, they'll be forced to reassess timing and approach. Delay creates opportunities for interception. Sophia wanted to argue, wanted to maintain some illusion of independence and normal routine. But the look in Luca's eyes during dinner had been murderous, his intention clear despite the civilized setting. How long? She asked quietly. How long do I hide here while Luca's crew watches my building? Until we eliminate the threat permanently. Marco's expression softened fractionally. I know you didn't sign up for this level of disruption, but you're alive to be disrupted because you're here, rather than somewhere Luca's people can reach you. Vincent's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression darkening. Maya reports movement around Sophia's building. 2 vehicles, 6 men total, establishing surveillance positions. Tell Maya to maintain observation but don't engage unless they attempt entry. Marco moved to the window, looking out over gardens invisible in the darkness beyond his reflection. Let them watch an empty apartment. Let them waste time and resources on surveillance that yields nothing. Sophia joined him at the window, seeing their reflections overlaid on dark glass. This is my fault. I saved your life and started a war. You prevented a murder and exposed existing tensions. Marco turned to face her, his expression intense. The war was already happening, Sophia. You just made yourself visible in the middle of it. And now people want me dead because I was visible at the wrong moment. Sophia heard the bitterness in her own voice. I spent 19 years perfecting invisibility. 2 minutes of being seen and my entire life implodes. Or transforms. Marco's hand lifted, hovering near her face before falling back to his side. Sometimes destruction and creation are the same process. You're not who you were a month ago, Sophia. The question is whether the person you're becoming is someone you can live with. Sophia thought about the woman who'd served bourbon and kept her head down. The invisible waitress who'd watched life happen around her without participating. That woman had been safe but empty, existing rather than living. I don't know who I'm becoming, she admitted. But I know I can't go back to being invisible. Not after everything I've seen, everything I know. Then stop trying to go back. Marco's voice carried conviction that made her breath catch. Move forward instead. You have skills and intelligence that are wasted carrying plates. Use them. Build something beyond survival. Build what? A career in organized crime? Build influence? Agency? Protection that doesn't require hiding. Marco stepped closer, proximity making her pulse spike. You saved my life, Sophia. Let me help you build yours into something worth the risk you took. The offer hung between them, weighted with implications that went far beyond protection and professional development. Sophia recognized the moment for what it was, a threshold she could cross or refuse, a decision that would define her future regardless of which option she chose. Before she could respond, Vincent's voice cut through the tension. We have a problem. Luca's crew just attempted entry at Sophia's building. Maya engaged. Shots fired. 3 suspects down. Others fleeing. Marco was moving before Vincent finished speaking, pulling his phone and issuing rapid commands. Get cleanup crews to Sophia's building now. I want those bodies disappeared before police arrive. And find Luca Marchetti. I want to know where he is right now. Sophia stood frozen, processing the information. Maya had shot people. At her building. Men sent to kill her had been killed. Instead, their bodies now problems requiring cleanup crews and disappearance. The reality of Marco's world crashed over her with nauseating clarity. This wasn't academic observation anymore. This was blood, and bodies, and permanent consequences for temporary decisions. Sophia. Marco's hands gripped her shoulders, forcing her to focus on his face rather than spiraling thoughts. Breathe. You're safe. Maya did exactly what she was trained to do. Protect you from immediate threat. People are dead because of me. Sophia's voice sounded distant, disconnected. People are dead because Luca Marchetti sent them to kill you, and they failed. Marco's grip tightened fractionally. You didn't pull the trigger. You didn't order the hit. You're the victim here, not the perpetrator. But the distinction felt thin, stretched over a reality where her existence created death, regardless of intention. The next 72 hours blurred into a strange suspension where Sophia existed in Marco's estate, while her normal life continued without her. Maya reported that the cleanup at her building had been successful. No bodies recovered, no police investigation triggered, just another night in Charleston where violence happened and disappeared without official acknowledgement. Luca Marchetti had vanished, gone to ground while his family dealt with the fallout from the failed hit. Giuseppe had reportedly been hospitalized for chest pains, stress from family conflict manifesting in physical breakdown. Tommaso was consolidating control in his father's absence, reaching out to Marco through intermediaries to discuss potential alliance, and Sophia Chen remained in protective isolation, missing her classes, her shifts at the harbor room, her carefully constructed routine that had anchored her existence. She spent mornings running through Marco's private gardens, Maya shadowing her at a distance, afternoons in the library, reading criminal justice texts that now felt like instruction manuals rather than academic theory. Evenings having dinner with Marco, their conversations shifting from professional debriefing to something more personal, more dangerous. Tell me about your family, Marco asked over dinner on the 3rd night. You never mentioned them. Sophia pushed risotto around her plate, appetite diminished by captivity however luxurious. My mother lives in Atlanta. We talk occasionally, but we're not close. She remarried after my father died, started a new family. I was a reminder of grief she wanted to move past. And your deafness? Made me a complication rather than a daughter. The old hurt surfaced despite years of burial. She tried, but raising a deaf child requires patience and resources she didn't have. By the time I was 10, we'd reached an unspoken agreement. I'd be independent, and she'd feel less guilty about her relief. Marco listened without interruption, his attention complete in a way that made Sophia feel seen beyond surface observation. "What? About you?" she asked, turning the scrutiny back on him. "How does someone become this?" She gestured vaguely, encompassing the estate, the security, the organization he commanded. Legacy and choice combined. Marco sipped wine, considering his answer. "My grandfather came from Sicily in 1947, built an import business that was really an organized crime operation with corporate structure. My father expanded it, made it more legitimate without abandoning the foundations. I inherited both, the legal businesses and the illegal operations that fund them. You could have chosen differently, sold off the criminal enterprise, kept only legitimate holdings. I could have." Marco's expression held something between regret and acceptance. "But the organizations we build become ecosystems. Hundreds of people depend on the Castellano family for income, protection, services they can't access through legal channels. Dismantling that doesn't eliminate need. It just creates a vacuum someone else will fill, probably more violently than we do." "You're justifying again." "I'm explaining complexity." Marco leaned forward, intensity in his gaze. "The world isn't divided into good people and bad people, Sophia. It's filled with people making impossible choices in situations where every option carries cost. I choose to manage violence rather than eliminate myself and let chaos determine who replaces me." Sophia heard truth in his words, recognized the same moral ambiguity she'd been navigating since dropping a tray on his lap. Nothing was simple anymore. Not safety, not morality, not the growing attraction she felt toward a man who ordered bodies disappeared and then quoted philosophy over dinner. "What happens when this is over?" she asked quietly. "When Luca's handled and the Marchetti situation resolves, what happens to me?" Marco held her gaze, his expression unguarded in a way she'd never seen. "That depends on what you want. You can return to your apartment, your classes, your life with enhanced security until threats fade into memory. Or, or, or you accept that you've already crossed into my world and you build a place within it that uses your talents for something beyond survival." Marco paused. "I'm not asking you to become a criminal, Sophia. I'm asking you to consider partnership. Use your skills helping me navigate negotiations, assess threats, build intelligence networks. You'd be paid well, protected completely, and given agency over your own future. You're asking me to work for you permanently. I'm asking you to work with me. There's a difference." Marco's hand moved across the table, palm up in offering rather than demand. "You're brilliant, observant, capable of split-second decisions under pressure. Those skills are wasted in restaurants and lecture halls. They could transform how I operate, could prevent violence through early warning instead of reacting to threats that have already manifested." Sophia stared at his offered hand, understanding the decision's weight. Accepting meant abandoning the normal life she'd been fighting to maintain. It meant embracing the dangerous world she'd stumbled into, making permanent what she'd desperately wanted to be temporary. But it also meant agency, purpose, being seen and valued for exactly who she was, rather than accommodated despite her limitations. She placed her hand in his, feeling calluses that matched her own from different kinds of survival. "Partnership," she said firmly, "not employment. If I do this, I'm an equal voice in decisions that affect me. No more being protected without consultation. No more having my life rearranged without input." Marco's fingers closed around hers, grip firm and warm. "Equal partnership. My word on it." The resolution with Luca Marchetti came not through violence, but through family intervention. Giuseppe recovered from his hospitalization with new clarity. His chest pains had been a warning that forced him to confront his own mortality and his family's future. He called a commission meeting, gathering the heads of Charleston's organized crime families to witness a formal transfer of power. Tommaso Marchetti was named as successor, with Giuseppe retiring to an advisory role that preserved his dignity while acknowledging reality. And Luca was expelled from the family entirely. His unauthorized hit on Marco and subsequent actions deemed violations of commission rules that governed how territorial disputes were managed. Sophia watched the meeting via secure video feed from Marco's office, reading lips as old men negotiated her safety and future without her physical presence. The agreement was binding. Luca Marchetti was forbidden from Charleston territory, his personal assets seized by the family, his crew disbanded and reassigned to Tommaso's control. "It's over," Marco said when the feed ended, Giuseppe's formal declaration complete. "You're safe. Luca's exile is enforced by commission authority. Breaking it means war with every family simultaneously." Sophia should have felt relief. Instead, she felt strange emptiness where fear had lived for weeks. What happens to him? Exile or death? His choice. Most expelled members disappear into other cities, change names, hope their past doesn't follow. Marco's expression held no satisfaction in his enemy's downfall. Luca made choices that cost him everything. That's consequence, not revenge. And me? Am I free to leave? Go back to normal life? Marco's gaze searched her face. "Are you asking permission or testing whether I'll honor our agreement about equal partnership?" "Both. Maybe," Sophia admitted. "Part of me wants to return to the apartment I know, the routines I built. But part of me recognizes that person doesn't exist anymore. She couldn't exist anymore, not after everything I've seen and learned." "Then stay." Marco's voice carried quiet intensity. "Not as my employee or my protection obligation. Stay as my partner. Help me build something better than what exists. We could transform how business operates, minimize violence through intelligence instead of reacting with force. You could make real difference, Sophia. More than you ever could studying criminal justice in classrooms that teach theory while ignoring reality." The offer was tempting precisely because it aligned with the person she'd been becoming, someone who acted rather than observed, who influenced rather than just witnessed. "I need to finish my degree," she said finally. "Not because the information matters anymore, but because I started something and I finish what I start. That's who I am." "Agreed. We'll arrange your schedule around classes." Marco moved closer, proximity making her pulse spike. "Anything else?" "I want to keep working at the harbor room. Part-time maybe, but I want to maintain that connection. The staff there became family when I didn't have one. I'm not abandoning them completely." "Also agreed." Marco's hand lifted to her face, fingertips tracing her jawline with careful gentleness. "You've thought about this." "For 3 days straight." Sophia met his gaze directly. "I know what I'm choosing, Marco. I know the risks and the complications. But I also know that invisible safety isn't living, it's just surviving quietly. And I'm tired of just surviving." Marco's expression transformed, warmth replacing the careful control he usually maintained. "Then let's build something worth the risk you're taking. Together." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to retreat if she wanted. Sophia didn't want. She closed the distance between them, her lips meeting his in a kiss that felt like decision and transformation combined. When they finally separated, Marco's forehead rested against hers, both of them breathing carefully. "This complicates things," Sophia whispered. "Everything worth having is complicated." Marco's thumb traced her cheekbone. "Simple is boring. We're many things, Sophia, but boring isn't one of them." 6 months later, Sophia stood in Marco's library reviewing intelligence reports from the latest commission meeting. She'd graduated with her criminal justice degree, finished her last shift at the harbor room with a goodbye party that had made her cry, and fully embraced her new role as Marco's strategic advisor and partner. The work was everything he'd promised: intellectually challenging, morally complex, occasionally dangerous, but deeply satisfying in ways academic study had never been. She prevented conflicts through early intelligence, negotiated agreements that minimized violence, used her observational skills to navigate situations where traditional approaches would have failed. And Charleston's criminal landscape was shifting because of it. The Castellano organization's reputation had evolved from purely enforcing territory to mediating disputes, their intelligence networks preventing problems before they escalated into bloodshed. Marco entered the library carrying 2 cups of coffee, handing her one prepared exactly how she preferred: excessive sugar and cream that made it barely qualify as coffee. The Marchetti report came in, he said, settling beside her at the table. Tommaso's doing well, territory is stable, operations are profitable, and he's implemented several of our suggested operational improvements. And Luca? Sophia had followed the expelled son's trajectory with professional interest and personal wariness. Last seen in Atlanta, working security for a rival family, keeping his head down. Marco's expression suggested he'd received more detailed intelligence than he was sharing. He knows better than to return to Charleston. The commission's exile is absolute. Sophia set down her coffee, turning to face Marco fully. Do you ever regret it? Bringing me into your world? Making me part of this? Marco considered the question with characteristic seriousness. I regret that you didn't have a choice about when and how it happened, but I don't regret where we ended up. You've transformed how I operate, how I think about problems and solutions. You make me better, Sophia. That's worth whatever guilt I carry about the circumstances. She understood what he meant. Their partnership had evolved beyond professional collaboration into something deeper, more personal. They'd navigated threats and negotiations, built something functional and occasionally beautiful from circumstance and choice combined. I used to think visibility meant vulnerability, Sophia said quietly. That being seen meant being targeted. But you taught me that visibility can be power when you control the narrative around it. You taught me that protection means more than guns and security protocols. Marco's hand found hers, fingers interlacing with familiar comfort. Sometimes it means creating space for someone to become who they're meant to be, rather than keeping them safe and small. A knock at the library door interrupted their moment. Vincent entered with his usual professional courtesy. Sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation developing with the Cardone family's shipping operations. They're requesting your mediation before it escalates to commission level. Marco glanced at Sophia, question in his eyes. She nodded, already standing and gathering her notes. Let's go, she said, signing the words as she spoke them, a habit they'd both maintained, communication happening on multiple levels simultaneously. Cardone respects tactical intelligence. I'll read the room, you'll negotiate terms. Vincent smiled slightly. You two are terrifyingly effective together. The families are starting to call you Il Consulente Silencioso, the silent consultant. Sophia laughed at the nickname. Because they think I can't hear their conversations. Because you hear everything that matters, Marco corrected, his expression holding pride and affection combined. And you use that information to prevent bloodshed. That's worth a dramatic Italian nickname. They headed out together, partners navigating a world built on violence and negotiation, protection and observation. Sophia had stopped being invisible, had transformed from waitress to strategic advisor, from victim to valued ally. The tray she'd dropped had changed everything, saved a life and started a war, destroyed her old existence and built a new one from the ruins. She'd never regret those 2 minutes at 8:58 p.m. when she'd chosen to be seen. Some moments of visibility were worth every complication that followed. Epilogue. 1 year after the tray incident, Sophia and Marco stood on the balcony of his estate, watching Charleston's sunset paint the river in shades of gold and crimson. The city spread below them, beautiful and dangerous in equal measure, just like the life they'd built together. No regrets? Marco asked, echoing the question she'd posed months ago. Sophia thought about the deaf waitress who'd perfected invisibility, who'd kept her head down and her observations to herself. That woman had been safe, but empty, existing in the margins of other people's lives. No regrets, she confirmed, her hand finding his with easy familiarity. Some risks are worth taking. Some visibility is worth the danger. Marco pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her as the sun completed its descent. Thank you for dropping that tray. Sophia laughed against his shoulder. Thank you for learning to sign thank you for a deaf waitress who served your bourbon. Small kindness, enormous consequences. The best things usually start that way. They watched darkness claim Charleston, the city transforming into constellation of lights that mapped lives and secrets happening beneath civilized surfaces. Sophia had learned to navigate that hidden world, had found purpose and partnership in spaces she'd never imagined occupying. The deaf waitress had become il consulente silenzioso, the woman who heard everything that mattered and used that knowledge to prevent violence rather than perpetuate it. And Marco DeLuca, the Mafia boss who'd learned sign language for a waitress, had found in her something worth more than territory or power. Genuine partnership built on mutual respect and hard-won trust. Some debts, they'd discovered, transformed into gifts when repaid with attention and care. Some moments of being seen changed everything. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.